this evening. Okay, and we're recording. Great to see everybody here, some old friends, and I think my cousin Tom is on as well. And Maria just popped in, Jim Cummins. Great to see everybody. Ellen, Leslie, thanks very much for joining us this evening, folks. Also want to say Jim Siegel is on with me here. Jim is our resident biologist at the NCTC, and he'll answer all the hard questions that might come up later on. So thanks for joining us, Jim. Fresh in from California. He just got off the plane, almost literally. So we'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to share my screen here and see if we can bring up some slides and make them full screen. And hopefully you all can hear me okay. As Krista mentioned, my internet was a little bit sketchy. So I've got some slides to share, and we'll stop about a third of the way through for some questions, and then more questions at the end of that. Then I've got a little bit of video, but the video might be a little troublesome, so I'm not sure that's going to work for everybody. But I think the slides will come across fine. And so let's go ahead and get started. Like Krista mentioned, let me back up one. This is a partnership with the Outdoor Channel. They do all the streaming for us. Originally, way back when in 2006, when we first started, we tried streaming it ourselves. And for a little bit of time, we had a partnership with a university, and it just got to be so popular that it bogged our servers down, and the university servers got bogged down. So long story short, we've had this partnership with the Outdoor Channel that does the streaming for us. And so that's worked out pretty well. And the Friends of NCTC are our major partners in making this all happen. And of course, we want to acknowledge many of you who have been with us for a long time, and dedicated fans from around the country and the world, really. This spring, when the Eagles nesting season was going on, we had folks from Romania, Croatia, France, Australia, Canada. So this nest really does give a lot of folks enjoyment to see. So let's take off, and we'll take a little tour of the National Conservation Training Center. I know most of you are familiar with it, but for those that aren't, we are located about 2 hours drive from Washington, D.C., or outside the Beltway, maybe an hour and a half from the Beltway. If you were in a canoe and you jumped on the river at NCTC, about 70 miles downstream, you'd be in Washington, D.C. So we are in the eastern panhandle of West Virginia, beautiful part of the state, right along the Potomac River. And if you go across the river, then of course you're in Maryland. We're not far from Virginia and the Pennsylvania border as well. So we're in kind of a sweet spot here along the Potomac River, and it's great habitat for lots of critters, including bald eagles. One of the major factors that I'll mention, since we've got Jim Cummins with us this evening, is the Potomac. The Potomac was a mess maybe 50 years ago. It was pretty badly polluted. It's been cleaned up a lot since then. The Interstate Commission of the Potomac River Basin, Jim was a big part of that. Getting the Potomac cleaned up is one of the reasons eagles are coming back in full force like they are today. Jim mentioned in the chat room there that we think there might be 200 bald eagles in West Virginia. There might be 100 or more nests. Nationally, they believe the last survey was about 71,400 pairs, nesting pairs, and that's up from a low of about 417 back in the 60s. So getting our rivers cleaned up, the Clean Water Act helped that. And it's great habitat. Now the nest location from here would be just off the edge of the screen. You can't see the nest tree in this photograph, but you can see Dam 4, if you can see my mouse circling, that's Dam 4 on the Potomac, and the National Conservation Training Center. Here's a little closer view of some of our main buildings. The auditorium is right here, the entry building, instructional west, the lab building, instructional east, and here's our education outreach, West Pond right there. It's an older photograph. And then the production building, or what we call creative resources, is down here in the lower left. So this is the kind of view that the eagles would see when they fly from their tree to the Potomac, and that's the Potomac you can see in the background. So you can see we're kind of right on the edge of the Potomac. The nest is on the western side of the campus, about 95 feet up in a big sycamore tree. And we do post the area during the nesting season. We want to keep people away from the nest, and so we watch it online. Now, here's some of the original photographs that we had way back in 2003. They started bringing in sticks, and you can see the nest is relatively small here. You can see why they chose this limb. It kind of goes horizontally before it goes vertically. So that gave them a natural place to kind of put some sticks in there. And in 2003, that fall of 2003, we watched them bring it in, and it's a lot of work. You can imagine the amount of energy it takes to build a nest like this. But they got it done, and there it is one of the early shots of it. And like I said, it was a lot of work. The original pair. Now, as unofficial policy, we're an agency of biologists. Fish biologist, wildlife biologist, avian biologist. And so as an agency, we don't name wild animals, but everybody else that watches the nest names them. So just so you know, the original pair, everybody named them. The folks that watch the viewers of this, like I said, from all over the country, they chose the names Liberty and Bell, and they were the original pair. And then later on, the pair changed. I'll talk about that more a little bit later. But the original pair laid their first eggs in 2004. But we didn't have a camera on it then. But then in the fall of 2004, we put the first camera up there. And so in the spring of 2005, these are some of the first images that we got off the original camera. And 2006 was a very good year. There were 3 eggs. They all hatched. They all fledged. There's the June of 2006. We've got 3 juveniles in there. And so it was amazing to watch them up close and personal. 2007 was a rough winter, very hard on them, but they persevered no matter what the weather. They went through freezing rain, snow, sleet, ice, you name it, cold temperatures. They stay on the nest regardless. And they'll spread their wings out, make some people call that tenting or a mombrella to try to keep the eggs, as dry as possible. Again, in 2008 was a good year. Lots of fish coming in. You can see a nice size fish right there. 3 young ones being fed, double teamed by the adults there. Well, technology has changed, and the cameras have gotten a lot better since that time. Nowadays, high resolution digital cameras. And I do want to mention a Facebook group called Bald Eagles 101. Deb Stasek started it. Deb is way up in northern Alberta, Canada, but she's been one of the original people that have just kept incredibly detailed notes on this nest. In fact, she tracks nests in Bald Eagles 101 folks. Now they have citizen science volunteers. They track nests across the United States. I think right around 50 nests that they keep track of. And so Deb is often posting videos on YouTube. So if you really want to keep track and you want to see some really great YouTube videos, check out Bald Eagles 101 and join their Facebook group, and you can kind of keep track of bald eagles from across the country. So that's a great photograph that Deb had there. So nowadays we're getting high resolution photos, And we have our current camera has a built-in DVR feature that you can go back 12 hours on. So if you miss something that hatched, like an egg hatching, for example, you can back it up. And the way you do that is you grab that little gray ball and slide it with your mouse. It's easier to do on a computer. It's a little harder to do on a cell phone or a tablet, but like I said, easier on a computer to do. You can also use these two little wheels here. They'll back it up just 10 seconds at a time. So that's sort of how you fine tune it. But if you know something happened at, let's say, 10 a.m., you can back it up to 10 a.m. And what you want to do when you do that is pay attention to the upper left time stamp there. That's real time in Eastern time, and then the date up there. The time that you see on the lower right, that's just sort of a relative time, doesn't mean too much. But there's also a comment section there below the video on the outdoor channel. And so folks are watching it pretty much nonstop. And a lot of folks even record it so they can see what happened when they're not there. And that's the best way to keep apprised on what's going on night or day. We have a very dedicated group of people that, especially when the eggs are laid and when they're getting ready to hatch, there are people watching it all the time, even at night. And so the new camera has night vision on it too. So you can see the lights of the NCTC campus here in the background. And that infrared, it's a new kind of infrared. The older infrared had kind of a yellowish tint to it that was sometimes visible by the human eye, but the new type of infrared is not visible to our eyes, but we can see the birds. It does attract bugs, by the way, and so they'll build spider nests. So a lot of people wonder how we get the camera up there. Well, we used to climb the tree. We had a tree climber, an arborist who came out. Now the tree itself is healthy, but the limb that holds the nest up is dead. And you can see I'm sliding my mouse over it. That limb has been dead for a while, but overall the tree is healthy. So we have a tree truck come in, and we have a friend, Kyle Friend is his name. Some of you might know him from Kearneysville. It's SNK Enterprises Tree Service. He's got a great machine. It's called a knuckle boom crane that I believe was built in Austria, the crane itself, on the back of a big Peterbilt diesel truck. And Kyle is roped into a harness. He's got a climbing harness on, and he's on a rope 100 feet up there. The camera is about right around 100 feet. The nest is about 95 feet. And so you can see the camera right behind his head. Now, this October 22nd, we installed 2 new cameras. One of them is online right now. Clayton just got it up and running today, as a matter of fact. He had to do some server upgrades to it. But so that's where our signal is coming from. Runs down to the ground. We used to have a solar on it, but that was kind of unreliable. So now we've got it piped underground to the daycare center, and from there it goes to our servers. So it's a more reliable signal these days. So we always thank Kyle Friend and his company for helping us get this out there. We do that in October when the eagles aren't around much. That's their kind of late summer is kind of their downtime. But come November, they're going to start their yearly cycle all over again. So now the camera is about, like I said, 95 feet off the ground, perfect eye level view for a bald eagle selfie. And I'll stop here for a little bit to see if we have any questions. I see we've got some things in chat here. Let's see. Hello to Dave and Marcy. Glad to see you with us. Like Jim said, yeah, about 200 bald eagles nests. That was a 2017 census, and we know there's more since then. How old is the eagle nest sycamore? I would say it's well over 100 years old, probably Yeah, Jim answered that. Probably closer to 125 years. The number of chicks, Jim says they lay up to 3 eggs, usually 2 and 3 in West Virginia. Yep, like I mentioned, we've had good years where we've had 3 eggs and they all hatch. Whether they survive, that depends a lot on the food supply. Concerns that the limb will break and not be able to support the nest. We were worried about that, Kelly. So what we did last year is we constructed a kind of a crude platform made out of mulberry and black locust limbs about 30 feet below the existing nest in a big, strong crotch of the tree. So if that existing nest does fall, that will give them a place to start. And we've consulted with other biologists around the country. I know Arizona Fish and Game did that a few years back. They had a tree blow over, I believe. Another one, they had bad insect infestation problems. So in a nearby tree, they just put a crude platforming in there, and the adult eagles took advantage of it. So that's what we did last year. And so that platform is, like I said, it's very crude, but if the eagles need it, they've been down to check it out already. We've seen them there. And that will give them a place in the event that the existing nest does go over. That'll give them a place to start from fresh. And of course, we'd have to reposition the cameras and all of that. So what I'll do now is talk a little bit about kind of a year in the life, so to speak, a little bit about the behavior and biology of bald eagles. And a lot of question that people ask is, how do you tell the male from the female? The female is usually the bigger of the two. And in this case, she's on the right-hand side here. And my slide is not changing for some reason. Let me try the mouse. It seems to work with that. Here, the female is again on the right-hand side. And in November, anytime now, they'll start bringing in sticks. That's all part of the mating ritual and bonding ritual. They'll bring sticks in, they'll start building that nest up. And November, December, that's what they do. And so if you're looking at the eagle's nest, you might see them occasionally. They're not in a big hurry to do it, but as it gets closer to nesting time, then you'll see them there a lot more often. So the female is on the left in this case. Nice sunny day there. And it's often comical to watch them, sort of argue, so to speak, about where the stick should go. One will get on one end, one will be on the other. They'll pull and push, and finally they'll get it put in and situated. And one thing that really bothers them is if one is sticking up in their landing path, that they'll really work hard to try to get anything that's going to mess with them when they try to land out of the way. But January is mating time, and you can tell here it's a cold day. You can see the female on the right's got her feathers ruffled up there, a snowy day. And then the eggs are laid in mid-February. I'm going to have to use my mouse to control. My laptop is kind of acting up, but they'll lay eggs in right around Valentine's Day. Middle of February is when the eggs are laid. And it's a 35 to 38 day incubation period. And they'll do everything, like I said, to keep those eggs as dry as possible, whether it's rain or snow. They've got to turn those eggs about once every hour or so to keep the eggs evenly heated, and also to keep the membrane inside. If the egg lays in one spot, the embryo could actually stick to the inside of the egg. So they do turn them often with their beaks, and they will take turns sitting on the nest. It's not always the female. I'd say she's there maybe 80% of the time, but the male does come in and give her breaks. So if one of them gets tired, they'll lay their head back and give a loud, shrill call, and that's a signal that, hey, I need a break, come in. Notice in this photo that I believe it's the female here, and the male is sitting on the nest. She's got her talons balled up. It's very interesting to watch. Of course, their talons are super sharp, so they ball them up like a fist so they don't actually puncture an egg or injure a chick when they trade places. But if all goes well in 35, 38 days, we'll have a hatch. And here you can see one eaglet is hatched and another egg is cracked there and it's on its way. And by the way, these photos weren't all from the same year. I've chosen these from multiple years so we can sort of see different stages of development. But there's the little guy sticking his head up. It's amazing how strong they are from, just a few hours after they hatch. They start getting fed. They do have a little bit of a nutrient sac from the egg that keeps them going, provides them some energy.
No,
But
it's not.
before long, the eagles are going to tear off little pieces of fish and feed them. I'll pause here for a second and see if we have any more questions.
I think Jill Craig might have had a question. She had her hand up. Jill, do you still have that question?
I see Jim's got a comment here. Thanks for noting that the bald eagles are one of the first to lay their eggs each year in February. They do this to prepare for the spring fish runs. Yeah, good point, Jim, that start up in March when their eggs are hatching. And very good point. There's food on the way. In the tidal Potomac, there's shad and there's herring that run. And up on this part of the river, I think suckers and carp, they're not picky when it comes to fish. They'll take whatever they can catch. But that's a good point there, Jim. Thank you. Any other questions before I continue on here? So they're double teaming here, and it takes a lot of fish to feed these. Now, when they're little, it's always interesting to watch. They'll tear off tiny little pieces of fish. It's not always fish, but fish is definitely their preferred food because it's high protein, it's got moisture. Remember, these young ones can't get a drink of water for the first 3 months of their life. Until they fledge the nest, they're fully, the size of an adult. And mid-June, that's the first time they can actually get to the river. So from the day they hatch until mid-June sometime, the only water moisture they get is from the food that they eat. And fish is high protein, it's got good moisture, but they'll also get rabbits, squirrels, snakes, a duck or a goose, whatever they can catch. And if the river's high and maybe too muddy to catch fish, that's when we might see them go after other prey out in the field there. And the little ones grow amazingly fast. Here you can see a lot of dried grass brought into the nest. That's what they do to keep the nest, if it gets real wet from a soaking rain, one of the adult pair will try to bring in some dry grass. But the little ones grow amazingly fast. And this little guy might be about a week old, roughly speaking, but it doesn't take long. You can see already he's starting to get a little bit of that gray down on there. In this picture, even more gray. And here he's strong enough to sit up on its own, maybe about roughly 2 weeks old. And they eat and they sleep and they sleep and they eat. Now look at this little one sleeping. You can see his craw there is full. The crop is full, I should say, C-R-O-P. It's kind of a place on their gizzard that allows them to store food. And other birds have that. Chickens, turkeys, ducks have a crop, but they can store food there and they can gorge themselves and then digest it later. So when you're looking at them and you wonder if they've eaten, if you see this bulge right here, that means they have eaten and they've got a full crop. And the adults seem to sense that they're going to grow fast, and they'll continue to bring sticks in and place them around the nest, sort of a crib rail, so to speak, for when the little ones get bigger, before long, they've got pin feathers, or blood feathers, some people call them. They've got a blood supply to them. These darker feathers that we see coming in here. The end of them is kind of the shape of a pin, but you can see them starting to come in around 4 to 5 weeks, they'll start getting them. They're still not well protected, so they do need protection from wind or rain at this point. Also protection from predators. There's hawks, there's owls, there's other bald eagles that might prey on these little guys. So the adults are standing guard. The bigger the young ones get, the less likely the adults are going to be in the nest, but they're always nearby. So at around 5 weeks of age, you can see the pin feathers are coming in pretty good. They almost have a clown-like appearance. Their talons and their beaks grow faster than the rest of the body. And so they kind of stumble around a little awkwardly, sometimes fall over themselves, and people get a kick out of watching that. But they grow amazingly fast. Sometimes it almost seems like from day to day, you can see them be a little bit bigger. And before you know it, around 5 weeks of age, their feathers, their adult feathers are many of them are in. They're not completely done growing feathers, but structurally, their body grows first, and then their talons in their beak, and then their feathers come in. But over by 6 weeks, they're pretty well covered with their adult feathers, even though they're still growing. And like I said, even when you might not see the adults on the nest, they're probably in a nearby tree or up above camera range watching. And look at this is a series of 4 photos here. In this case, there was a bird coming around. Could have been another eagle, but the adults are tracking it, and they're going to squawk and squeal and try to chase that other bird away. And if that bird that's in their airspace doesn't get the message, one of them is going to take off and chase it out of the range of the nest. They don't want any other birds coming in. Little songbirds, they're not worried about them, but any bird that they perceive as a threat to their young ones, they're going to get up and get that bird out of the area. Now, before long, on spring days, now we're kind of in May, this is about the size the birds would be. They'll start flapping their wings. We start calling them kind of juvenile birds at this point. They're still not fully adult size. They're still growing, but they're getting the feel of their wings and the wind under their wings. And on windy days, they'll hop around. It's fun to watch that. They'll stretch their wings out. They do a lot of exercising to build up their muscles and get the feel of the wind under their wings. Remember, they're still continuing to eat. We've seen 6 or 8 fish in the nest, on good days when the fishing is good, because they can really go through a lot of fish. Before long, they're going to learn to tear off little pieces of fish on their own. They've got to be strong enough to actually stand on the fish like the adults do and hold it with their talons, hold it down, and then pull it off with their beak. So that takes a certain amount of strength to do that. They'll try doing it, but at first it doesn't work so well. So the adults will keep on feeding them till they know for sure that they're strong enough to get the food or to eat the food and tear the food off of the fish on their own. But they will start kind of windsurfing. They'll get up on this lower stump, and before long, they're brave enough to get up onto the top of perch here. Some people call this the attic. If you're looking in the comments section and somebody says the bird's up in the attic, this is what they're talking about. It's the upper perch, and you can see it's about 4 or 5 feet higher than the lower perch right here. So that's their sort of progression. On wet days, they'll get up and hang their wings out. The adults will do that too to let them dry. You can see the primary flight feathers. There's the adult letting theirs dry out. This year we did have two young ones. This happened to be 2019 when that was kind of a sad thing that happened that year. There were two hatched, two eggs, they both hatched, but on the second day, the young one is actually strong enough to crawl out of the nest cup or the nest bowl, and it fell into a crevice between the sticks there, and it couldn't get out. Now, people wonder why, why don't we call up the truck and bring it out and, rescue it? And I always explain to people that that ultimately would do more harm than good. If we did that, that's going to chase the adults away. And in cold weather, if they were to leave the nest, then the other young one might perish or be exposed to predators. So we kind of have to let nature take its course with these birds. They are totally wild birds. They came here on their own. We didn't do anything to entice them. It just happened to be ironic that they chose the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Training Center as a place to build the nest. But before long, here's the size of the juvenile. It's actually bigger than the male. We think this was a female that year, and they get very aggressive. There's a fish under the wing here, and it's comical to watch. Even when the adults are in there, they'll grab at the adults. The juvenile will grab their leg. They know instinctively that they have to guard their prey, because out in the wild, there's going to be another bird try to come and take that food away from them. So, that's just that's their natural instinct. That's the way these bald eagles are. So here's the scene we like to see about mid-June. If all goes well, they fledge and they leave the nest for the first time. And here about 9 o'clock is the young juvenile in the tree. The adults, you can tell them by their white head. Now, juveniles will not get that white head and tail feathers until they're about 5 years of age or mating age. And their head and tail feathers will start to turn from black or brownish black to white. And then that's when they're going to be looking for a mate to start the cycle all over again. Now, they will stay around the nest for, the summer, June, July, August. They associate that nest with food. So they're going to come back if the fishing is not good down by the river. They're going to associate that nest, and they'll come back looking for a meal, whether the adults bring it there or not. The young ones will often come looking for something to eat, and the adults will bring them food back from time to time. But mostly they're down along the river, honing their fishing skills, their hunting skills. A lot of that's instinct, but they're probably hanging out with, if not the adults, then some other juvenile eagles. There's kind of safety in numbers, in that if one bird finds food, then the other birds might be able to get some of that. But that's kind of the year in review, the bald eagle year. That's some of their behavior. This was shot from this year. These are the two young ones, probably less than a week old in this shot. This was March the 25th, and they're being double teamed there. So that is the URL for the Outdoor Channel. It's outdoorchannel.com/EagleCam. And we do have educator resources up. We've got a whole lot of lesson plans and there are a lot of online resources that you can find if you're a teacher or if you know teachers. I also do a lot of sessions with schools. I was at Leslie's school, Shepherdstown Elementary, this year, right around Earth Day. We did a session, but I do a lot of Zoom sessions with teachers at schools around the country. And if you know a teacher or you are a teacher, feel free to email me. My name, Randy_Robinson at fws.gov, and we can set something up for springtime nesting season when that rolls around again. So I'll just stop sharing for a little bit here, and we'll go see if we've got some more questions. Let's see, is it true that they have young early because they would get too hot in an open nest later on? Yeah, that's exactly right. That's one of the reasons they have them early. As Jim Cummins said in the post above it, another reason to have them early is to be able to take advantage of those spawning fish, the shad, the herring, the suckers that come up. So abundant food. So even though they have to endure bad weather in February and March, they then are able to take advantage of abundant food later in the spring. And yeah, and another thing, like Jim said, their midsummer is very hot and they can't get any water until about mid-June when they're big enough to fledge and fly on their own down to the river. What is the purpose of the green material the adults bring to the nest? Well, that's a very good question. And Jim says it could be some kind of pest control. That's our best guess. Some kinds of vegetation that they bring in might have some, the pesticides that we get, the pyrethrins, those come from natural plant materials. So the adults may know something there that we don't as far as pest control. Those fish sitting in the nest, cooking in the sun, they do attract some flies, and you'll see them often from time to time. Other nests on the Potomac, yes. Every year we are seeing more nests on the Potomac. I know there's one, if you're local to Shepherdstown, if you know where Steamboat Run is located, it's on the opposite side from Steamboat Run, on the Maryland side of the river, right along the C&O Canal. That one's been there for maybe about 3 years. And Marjorie said, could you put the educator resource link back? Let me see if I can bring that back up. Here we go. Oops, that's the wrong slide. Let me go to the last one. And let's see. Let me see if I can copy and paste that. See if this works. There we go. Okay, there it is. Yep. So I'm actually right now, give me a day or two because I'm updating that list. So if you go there now, you won't see it, but in a day or two, it'll be updated and have those resources there. And by the way, feel free to email me as well. I might be able, I'm always finding new things online and updating that. Yep, like Jim says, young ducks, geese are out there in the spring, young rabbits and woodchucks, and they don't know enough at that point to be afraid of eagles. Eagles have very good eyesight. It's said that they can see a rabbit a mile away. Their territory, maybe at least a mile in radius from their nest. It's probably more than that. I've read 3 square miles. I don't know how you measure a eagle doesn't measure a square mile, but I'd say at least a mile in radius in all directions from their nest. They're going to be hunting and fishing there. What keeps the little ones from falling out of the nest? Well, they they build those sticks up. So that's kind of like their crib rails. But as we saw, as I mentioned, that's not perfect. One didn't fall out of the nest 2 years ago. It actually fell into the cracks between the sticks. A little bit of a crevice in there. But other ones, there was a case up in Wisconsin, no, it was Iowa, where these were bigger. They weren't ready to fly yet, but they were, let's just say, 2 months old. and the black flies got so bad, they tormented the birds so bad that the birds tried to fly and they couldn't. And one fell to the ground, and they found it pretty quickly, the people that watched the nest all the time. They were able to take it back and put it in the nest. The other one they didn't find for a week. It had a broken wing, so they had to rehab it. So it does happen. Sometimes, in that case, it was insects bothering. Sometimes when they're practicing their flight, a big gust of wind will come up and blow them out. But usually if they're at that point, if it's mid-June, we call that a sort of an accidental fledge or an early fledge. They're probably going to be okay. They'll hang on to another limb and eventually make their way back into the nest. We've seen that happen before. So Krista said, please screen share the educator resource link. You brought it up when it needs to be screen shared for us to see. Okay, I put it in the chat right above there, Krista.
Oh, you did.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Randy. I didn't see that.
Yeah, it's nctc.fws.gov/topic/eagle-cam. Not the easiest one to remember, but shoot me an email if you can't find it. Like I said, in a couple of days, I'll have that new educator resources put up there. How strongly did they defend their territory? Very strongly. Any threat, whether it's a crow, a raven, a hawk, an owl. Speaking of owls, it's not uncommon. If you go on YouTube, I'm sure you'll find, we've seen it a lot happening in Florida, but great horned owls are notorious for coming in the nighttime out of the clear blue sky and just knocking an adult eagle off its nest. It happened in Pittsburgh just this past winter. By the way, there are other eagle cams to watch in the area. I mentioned Bald Eagles 101, but just in our mid-Atlantic area, there's 2 eagle cams in DC. There's 1 in Baltimore. There's 2 in Pittsburgh. There's 2 in central Pennsylvania. 1 not far, it's right up in the Gettysburg area. And so, and of course, NCTC. So we've got, half dozen within, let's say, 100-mile radius of the training center now. So they do strongly defend their territory. Yeah, I mentioned that the owl that came into the nest in Pittsburgh knocked the adult right off the nest. Didn't hurt it apparently. The adult got right back on, but that owl was probably trying to go after some eggs. That same nest in Pittsburgh had a raccoon, not a very smart raccoon, but probably a hungry raccoon, climbed up into the nest, and the eagle didn't get the raccoon, or it would have been dinner. But the raccoon didn't get the eggs either. The raccoon defended, or the eagle defended the nest. So they are very vigorous defenders of their nests. And yeah, Jim said they're often about 10 miles apart on the river. Because we're on Terrapin Neck, there's a big bend in the Potomac River where we're at. There's, that's about, I'd say that's about roughly 8 to 10 river miles, but it's shorter as the crow flies or as the eagle flies, so to speak. Oh, Jim's got an interesting comment there about the nest by the Woodrow Wilson Bridge. Yeah, the eagle coordinator came and surprised to find them in an urban environment. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. They're adapting. And at NCTC, we're of course not urban there, but there's cars going in and out, there's trucks, there's noise. We've got wood chippers and, the usual things, but they don't seem to mind that too much. Even when we get the tree truck out there in the fall to do the maintenance, like I said, we try to do it when they're not around, but occasionally one will fly up and see the truck there, and they'll just fly away, and the next day they'll come back, and it doesn't seem to bother them. But they are very adaptable. There's a nest at the National Arboretum in DC. There's one just outside of pretty close to the Inner Harbor in Baltimore. The one in Pittsburgh is just a few miles up the river from downtown. So they seem to adapt as long as they can find food. Yeah, children screaming. Our eagle nest is pretty close to the daycare center, so you can often hear the kids out there playing and running around on nice spring days. Do juveniles, Leslie's asking, do they tend to stay close to where they hatched? For a while they do, Leslie, for the first few months, but and we've never tagged these birds. Other parts of the country, they have banded them and tagged them and tracked their whereabouts. And so from those studies, we know that they can go from 100 to 150 miles, but are away from the nest that they were hatched in. But our guess is that they don't go any farther than they have to. If they can go upriver or downriver, they'll do that. Or they, for example, they might fly down to Harper's Ferry and then up the Shenandoah. There's quite a few eagles' nests on the Shenandoah. This area is getting very populated with eagle nests, and it, we've seen fights on this nest. I mentioned right when I first started, the original pair that were here, the male got chased off the nest right around 2011, and a new male came in and took over. Now the original female didn't want to have anything to do with him, but I don't know if she sensed that the original male was gone. We don't know how they think, but we can only surmise. But eventually the new male did mate with the original female, and they had offspring from 2011 on. And then again in 2018, we saw this on video. It was right around midnight. We think it was a female eagle, judging from her size. She came, and the original female was sitting on her nest on eggs. They hadn't hatched yet. The female came in and just slammed into her, and they got into a big fight on the nest and tumbled over the edge of the nest. Now, some of the folks that watch it all the time think she was hurt badly. I don't know that she was. She was seen in the area. I went up on my bicycle up the C&O Canal looking for her. Didn't see anything. I thought, it would be highly unlikely I'd find an injured eagle, but nonetheless, I went and looked and didn't see her anywhere around. But eagles do fight. They do try to take over territory. And if you read a lot about eagle behavior, you'll see that they do say they mate for life, and that's more or less true. But if something happens to the male or something happens to the female, they will usually find another mate, and they'll try to take over a nest. If a female comes along and senses that a nest might be easy pickings, they might try to pick a fight and see if they can take over a nest. So that's what happened. And that's happened not just here, but many nests across the country. That happened at the National Arboretum, I think just this past year. It's fairly common. And we've seen it twice, one here at NCTC, once with the male in 2011, and again with the female in 2018. We don't know where the original pair that came in 2003 and started building, whether they might have came up from the Chesapeake Bay or down from the mountains. You know, the trough area of the Potomac had one of the only eagle's nest back in the 80s. The West Virginia Department of Natural Resources, I believe at that time, late 70s, early 80s, the only known nest in West Virginia was in the trough area of the Potomac, which would be upstream. So we don't know where these ones came down from because they've never been banded. Jim says when he started on 84, it was a notable day when we saw an eagle out on the river. By the time he retired in 2016, it was fairly common to see them on the Shenandoah, the South Branch of the Potomac, the North Branch. Yeah, the recovery is amazing. It's incredible. You know, when I was a kid, I grew up in Western Pennsylvania. I think there was one nest in the entire state of Pennsylvania up near Lake Erie in a big swamp, Pymatuming, Conneaut Swamp area. And now there's maybe 200-300 nests in Pennsylvania, and there's at least 4 of them that have cameras on them now. By the way, I wanted to share this with you. I've had it here. Try to get it close enough that you can see it. This is a fish hook and a bobber and fishing line that came into the nest in February of this past year. And so since February, it's kind of been bothering us. The people that watch the eagles all the time were very worried that, you know, they were going to swallow it. Now, this was before the young ones were hatched. Now, that's a pretty good sized hook there. It's probably a saltwater hook. I understand that freshwater hooks are made to rust, but this one looks like stainless, doesn't have much rust on it. But I saw the adult eagles, it came in a catfish. They picked up a catfish down by the river, and it was easy to spot because of this fluorescent bobber. But they brought it in, it was hanging out of the dead catfish's jaw. They ate every little bit of flesh around that catfish. Remember, it's February, and fish aren't real abundant, easy to catch. But they sensed that this was not edible, the adults did. And so they tried to pull this monofilament line, and it just slipped through their beak. But then they eventually pulled the hook out and dropped it at the edge of the nest. And we could see it for a while. And some folks wanted us to get up there and, you know, and get it out. And we said, no, we can't do that. You know, we're going to do more harm than good. We'll chase the adults away. The young ones will be, you know, susceptible to predators, or they might freeze to death. So let's just leave it, and hopefully it'll get covered over. And, you know, eventually it did. So then this October, on the 22nd, when Kyle Friend went up in his truck to install the new cameras, I asked Kyle to look around for it. He took a little rake with him and raked around a bit, and sure enough, there it was. I said, you know, look for the orange bobber, and there it was. So we're glad to get it out of there. I would be more worried about, you know, one of the young ones getting it snagged on their leg or hooked on their wing or something like that. By the way, I mentioned a nest up near Gettysburg, PA. There's a big lake up there, Codura State Park. A few years ago, an adult bald eagle there was a steel jaw leg hold trap, a fur bearing trap that you would use to trap, you know, beaver or mink or something. The bald eagle must have found that bait and stepped in the trap, and the entire trap was on its leg, and it wasn't chained down. So the eagle was flying around with a trap on its leg for a week or maybe more, till finally, fortunately, a tree or a power line truck, the eagle was in a tree. They called the Pennsylvania Game Commission. They came out with a power company truck. They were, oh, I know what happened now that I remember. I think the trap got caught in the tree. The eagle couldn't fly. So they got up with a bucket truck, got the eagle, got the trap off of it. And the good news is that they were able to release it, and the bird was okay, although it was a pretty close call. So it's a little after 8. I'm going to try one thing here before we go. If you have any more questions, feel free to put them in the chat room, or just unmute your mic. And I'm going to look and see if I can share a video with you if my bandwidth will let me do it. Not so sure that it will. I tried it a little bit earlier. Stand by for just a minute here. Let me see if I can get my screen sharing up. There we go. Okay. Okay. Can you see the bald eagle in the snow in the nest there? Is that visible, Krista?
Everything now it is. Everything's just a little delayed. Your pictures might have a delay to them. So we now see the video paused and ready to go.
Okay. So while it's loading up, I'll just give it a minute for everybody to get it on there. And I'm going to leave it a smaller size here because if I make it larger, it's pretty high resolution, and the bandwidth just will bog it down. I had some other videos I wanted to share, but they're just too high resolution. They're HD, and the bandwidth won't allow it. But I'll share this one because this video went viral. It happened to be in February, and the ABC station in Washington, D.C. saw it, I guess, on our Facebook page, and they contacted us. And from there, it kind of spread, and we got numerous contacts from various magazines and online entities to share this particular video clip. It's the bald eagle in a snowstorm. It's the female sitting there. So I'll go ahead and hit play and see how this works. So she's sitting on her eggs. She got up and shook off. This was a mid-February snowstorm. Now she's turning the eggs. And, we're always amazed what, dedicated parents these birds are, both the male and the female. They'll stay on those eggs thick and thin. We've seen them completely covered in snow, to the point where only their beak is visible, and you just wonder how they can survive in those conditions. But they are amazingly tough birds. So I just wanted to share that video a little bit with you, and it's on YouTube, and many of these other videos are on YouTube too. And like I said, Bald Eagles 101 is a very good site too. Deb Stasic is very good about putting those eagle clips up there. You see how she's wiggling around a little bit? What she has is a bare spot, a brood patch on her breast where there's no feathers. So feathers are very good insulation, of course. So that brood patch allows the adult, the female or the male, to get their bare skin right up against the eggs, so they have maximum body heat, keeping those eggs warm. And by the way, I think a bald eagle's body temperature is, what is it, Jim? About 105 degrees. Whoops, we don't need the elk. Something like that. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing and go back. Jim's asking, is there a count of nesting eagles in the Potomac watershed? I'm not sure about that, Jim. I'm going to have to ask the West Virginia DNR ornithologist that question. We know that just this spring alone, there are 2 new nests in Jefferson County that that we called the DNR about, and they were going to put them on the watch. The last count that I know of was, I think, 2017. Jim mentioned that they're around 200 nesting pairs. That's all of West Virginia, but that was 2017. So my guess is there's got to be at least a couple dozen in Jefferson and Berkeley County alone. That's just a guess. And Jim says all birds are over 100 degrees Fahrenheit body temperatures. If only the female has a brood patch, does the male relieve the female for just a short time on the nest during snow? The male also has a brood patch. Yep, he's got a brood patch too. Yep. So they take turns with the egg duty. You know, it's interesting. The male is a little smaller, maybe a pound or 2 lighter and a little less wingspan, but that makes him a little bit more maneuverable, a little more agile. So he might be a little more adept at fishing and catching critters, whereas the female, being a little bigger body size, a little bigger wingspan, she is going to have a little more body heat. And so she's on the nest, especially if it's nighttime and it's very cold. 9 times out of 10, it's going to be the female that's going to be on the nest when the conditions, you know, are the worst. But as the spring progresses and temperature gets a little better, they'll take turns more often. Krista, did you have any other questions that came in via email or other venues?
At this point, I think you have covered all of them. I've been closely watching the chat. We've had a lot of great discussion, but I do not see any further. If you have not had your question answered, please go ahead and feel free to type it in the chat again, or just unmute yourself and ask it. We welcome any discussion.
Jim, did you
sorry,
want to
I
add
have another.
anything, Jim?
Oh,
Sorry, Leslie, go ahead.
No, that's okay. I just have another quick question. So do we think that it's Smitty and Bella, right?
Yep.
Do we think that they're still around? They're going to stick around and probably mate and be around in the nest again?
We hope so. You know, that's probably we've seen them off and on, you know, through the summer and the fall. Although lightning took out our main nest camera this summer, so for quite a while, we've only been able to view them from, we've got another camera in the iWest Instructional West building, so it's farther away. And so we can see the whole tree, but just today, Clayton got our Nest camera back online. So now we'll be able to get a better view of the two. But that's what we assume, Leslie, is that but there's no guarantees. 3 years ago, when the original female was attacked, that was after the eggs were laid. And the female that chased her away, we don't think that that's this current female. The two got into a fight. We don't know exactly what happened because we couldn't see it. But the eggs were lost that year. When it takes 2 eagles to raise young ones, because especially when they're hatched and growing, that one's got to be constantly going and catching fish or chasing away predators while the other one, is brooding the young or feeding the young. So if something happens to one of the eagles, like happened 2 different years, that's not good. It's not a good thing. The eggs might not hatch. If they got to spend any amount of time off the nest, the eggs could get too cold to, make them viable, or a predator could get them. So anything can happen, but yeah, we're hoping that the 2 will come back for a new season. We'll know before long in November. They'll start bringing sticks in here, any day now.
I'll keep an eye. Thank you.
Sure. Jim, what did I leave out that we ought to talk about?
I don't think we left out too much. I thought that, one of the things that's very interesting is that, the population can't just keep going up indefinitely. There is some carrying capacity of the river in terms of space and fish and 100-foot tall trees. And so that it's not unlimited, and they're very aggressive birds. And so they need to space themselves out so that they don't compete for food and for space and for mates. And so it looks like, since we see a lot of aggression in the nest between the eagles, we might be nearing some kind of carrying capacity at some point here. When that will be, it's hard to know.
Yeah, there's a question in here. How many years will they use their nest? Well, this nest has been there since 2002. Really 2003 they built it, and 4 is when they laid the first brood. But I think the largest nest in the country, it's been used, it's 30 some years old, and they estimate it weighs 2 tons. These nests can get so big and so heavy that they make the tree top heavy. And especially if they're filled with wet snow or ice and a big wind comes along, it can topple the tree over. Fortunately for us here, that sycamore is a big, strong tree. It's healthy. But the limb holding the nest is, that's why we put that secondary platform about 30 feet below, thinking that at some point in time, that nest could go down. But so far, so good. We've seen it in, a lot of heavy wind. We had some big winds last spring, and it stood strong. And even though that limb holding it up has been dead for some time, it's a strong limb. It's probably, 18 inches around at the bottom.
The birds can live about 20 years, in the wild. And so if a nest is there for 35 years, it's not just one pair of eagles, it's 3 or 4 pairs of eagles. They're only adult at age 5. And so a 20-year-old eagle has 15 years or so of reproductive life. And so the nest can be used over and over again by successive families of eagles.
Yeah, and other birds will come in. We've seen vultures in there. Last spring we saw a red-shouldered hawk. They were just curious. That's after the young ones had fledged and, the adults weren't around. So these birds that were in there, they might have been looking for, a leftover fish. Yeah, that little red-shouldered hawk was in there for quite a while. There was a nest tree that blew over, one of the ones I mentioned in Pittsburgh a couple of years ago, and the adults found a nearby hawk's nest that was abandoned, I guess, and they just sort of commandeered it, and they just sort of built onto it and built up and remodeled the hawk's nest, so to speak, and they had enough time to lay another hatch brood of eggs. It was early enough in the season they could lay again.
Another species that might use the nest might be a raven. A great blue heron might use the nest. There are a couple of different species that might try to use that nest if the eagles don't use it.
Well,
Okay.
Krista, I think,
One
oh, there's one
more
more.
question. Yeah, it just came in, Randy.
Would they use a man-made platform? Yes, they will. We've seen that documented in other parts of the country. Of course, for many years, Osprey, you know, if you've been out in Chesapeake Bay, you've seen Osprey platforms where they typically put a telephone pole into the ground, into the marsh or something, a flat piece of wood on top of it, and the Osprey love those things. But bald eagles, it's been documented other places where you know, I should say that they didn't make an entire nest. They just put a crude platform in like we did, and where there's a crotch of a tree, and we just simply stuck some limbs in there and made a very crude platform with the idea that the eagles, if they did lose their existing nest, probably they would see that and think that's a good place to start another nest. But that has happened in other parts of the country, and it's been well documented.
Okay. If you have any other questions, please feel free to let us know. Otherwise, we would like to, give a huge thank you to Randy. This was excellent. Thank you so much. It was really interesting, and it's so close to home for us as we all, know NCTC or watch the Eagle Cam. It's been nice to get this insider viewpoint from you, and Jim Siegel for helping. Thank you so much. And for all of you for joining, we appreciate your interest. I'm really looking forward to seeing you all back in January for our January monthly program. And I wish you all a wonderful rest of your fall and, holiday season. Oh, we have let's see, let's just make sure none of these are questions. We've got a lot of people, Randy, thanking you. Thank you. Thank you. Great talk, Randy. Very interesting. Lots of great comments, but no more questions. Wonderful. Thank you all. And we appreciate you. Thank you, Randy.
My pleasure. Thanks for joining us, everybody, and thanks for supporting the Potomac Valley Audubon Society. It's a great organization, and we appreciate all your support. And if there's anything comes up, feel free to email me or give me a call at NCTC, and I'm always happy to talk about eagles.
Excellent. Thank you all. And thank you, Randy. You guys have a wonderful evening, and I hope to see you all in person sooner than later.
Bye,
Thanks,
thanks.
Krista. Thanks, Jim. Thanks, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night, Randy and Jim. Thank you. Good night, everyone.